All right, I'm with Craig Parry of Vizsla Copper. Craig, how are you today?
Robert, I'm great. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. I think we spoke in May or June of last year in Vancouver,
Mm,
and we spoke about copper. Um, Copper has had some volatility in the last year. It had a big run above $5 a pound, then it briefly dropped back to
yeah.
$4 at the very end of last year. And now here we are back in the headlines with Mr. Trump making an executive order on copper. So before we get into Vizsla, because I do want to talk about some news the company recently had about the Poplar deposit, Poplar South target. What's your take on where we're at in copper, Craig?
Look, I think we're at the earliest of what will be, the boom market, the bull market to end all copper bull markets. We've seen, as you mentioned there, March last year, we saw data center demand in the US really cause a spike in the copper price then. And I suppose it's just that was a neat little window into how quickly things can change. And even, of course, the copper market, it's a now sort of 25 million ton per annum market. It's the biggest and deepest of the metal markets. Um, you know, Supply comes from particularly a few major mines around the world like Chuquicamata, Escondida, most of them in Chile and Peru, and then of course the Congo. Um, it's a big, deep market, and yet you see one small demand driver, really, a pickup in demand in the US for copper for data center development. And that was enough to drive the price from $4 all the way up to $5.10, an all-time high back in March last year. Of course, we then saw that come back a bit. But I thought it was just a very neat look through into what can happen when you see demand pick up, even modestly. And of course, what we do know, I've just been at the BMO conference. We saw Mike Henry speak. BHP continues to reiterate that over the next 20 years, where the copper market is in essence going to double to nearly 50 million tons of demand per annum, and nothing's changed on the supply side. It's still the most constrained time for copper supply ever, and it's only going to get worse. So, and I think you've probably heard me talk about this before, but the copper price, of course, when I joined Rio Tinto in 1999, was 70 cents a pound. It then went all the way to $4.60. So the metal price increased six times with a 30% jump in demand. The metal market went from 15 million tons per annum to 21 million tons per annum. And the price went up six times to that all-time high. This time around, of course, we're going to see the same supply demand change, about a 30% increase by the back end of this decade. But that's offset against a much tighter, much more constrained supply side. A lot of the big expanses have been done around the world. We haven't made big new discoveries much. It takes a huge amount of effort, time, and money to permit these projects, do the studies on them, and develop them. A lot longer than it's ever taken. And so I think we're just going to hit a window here over the next few years where those demand drivers don't go away. We need data centers with electrification themes happening writ large, such that you're going to see the copper price really spike up. There's going to be a sweet period at some point in the back end of this decade where I think we'll see $20 to $30 per pound copper. And of course, last time around from 1999 to 2010 or 11, we saw that same change in supply demand fundamentals, but much more supply could come on stream. We saw expansions from Chuquicamata, expansions at Escondida. We're not going to see that this time around. So I think we're heading for a sweet spot. Interestingly enough, still a pretty tough and tight market, particularly for copper juniors, but copper generally. I guess you've seen some of the bigger companies, mid-tier guys like Capstone, Hudbay, increase pretty substantially in share price, but it's still very challenged down here at the bottom end of the market for companies like Vizsla Copper. It's providing a really interesting opportunity for investors. I really thought by now people would have sniffed the tea leaves and seen that the copper price is about to really rally and start to get invested. I suppose what we are seeing is, though, a lot of people are trying to understand the space a bit more, coming back into junior investing into the copper market. And we're having some good meetings with people. who are trying to get their head around the best way to play this. And of course, Vizsla Copper is a great way to play it. We've got 4 billion pounds of copper in the ground, nearly 2 million ounces of gold, growing that resource base all the time. You want exposure. You can get exposure very, very cheaply now, Robert, by investing in some of these companies at this moment because they haven't really started to move in price just yet. That will change, and that'll change pretty dramatically, I think, by the back end of this year.
Just looking at the charts right now, the copper chart to me, daily, weekly timeframes, looks quite bullish. Copper is in an uptrend, but then I look at major copper miners like Freeport McMoran, and that's in a downtrend. It's trying to put in a bottom, but the performance of the equities is in stark contrast to the performance of the metal. We see this in gold and silver as well. And you mentioned your company, Vizsla Copper, 4 billion pounds of copper in the ground, but getting very little respect from the Canadian market. What is responsible for this incredible contrast, between valuations of the equities and the performance of the metals?
Yeah, look, it's a very simple continuation of sort of what's been going on for the past 3 years. We've in essence been in a bear market for metals generally since 2012, 13, because of course we had that sort of COVID spike 2020, 21, where it was very easy to raise money for any sort of junior. It was, a bit of a blessed time. I don't think I paid that as much respect at the time. As I should have. I think we thought that things were kicking off and going to continue. Of course, we then reverted to the mean. Pressure came on equities, and a lot of stocks came off, and it became very difficult to raise capital. I think investors remain cautious about the mining sector in general. There've been a lot of head fakes over the years, and that 2020-21 rally was probably one of the biggest head fakes. But there's fundamental things kicking in right now. Of course, you've seen record cash flow from the major metal producers, including some of the copper producers. Interesting, and you mentioned Freeport there. That's a great example. They were at BMO talking about how very hard to find that new supply. They're out there looking for it. They're looking for acquisition opportunities. I think what we're seeing is it just takes longer for equities to catch up. People have to really believe. We've still seen a dearth of generalist capital and new sources of capital coming into the sector. So it's still a recycling of existing resource investment funds. Up until probably 6 months ago, my mate Maria Smirnova at Sprott. Maria's the biggest shareholder in Vizsla Silver, our other more flagship company, if you like. She was still suffering redemptions as late as Beaver Creek in September last year. I think that's changed now. You're starting to see, all funds, including generalist funds, there's ETF volumes are growing. I think so. It's just taking a bit of time to trickle down because, of course, what you see first is the majors take off and get recognised for that additional cash flow. You then see the mid-tier guys and developers move. You've seen that with two of my companies. Skeena has gone from, we raised $1 billion from Orion midway through last year. We then took off from about $4 at the start of last year all the way up to $17 here a few days ago. Vizsla Silver again has gone from about $1.30. We're back around $3 today. So you've seen those developers, but you still haven't quite seen the juniors get re-rated and valued in that same way. And of course, it trickles down. I think after you've seen those mid-tiers rally like we did mid last year, it's probably 18 months to 2 years before you see that money look for a home in other opportunities, and it has to start to come down to juniors. So we're on the verge of that. You've seen a rally in some of precious metal juniors. You haven't seen it in the base metals just yet, although there are bright spots. Of course, we saw AMark and TDG put out great results. AMark looks like they've made a significant copper discovery up there in the Golden Triangle, or sorry, the Toodoggone of British Columbia, and their share price has gone from, I think it's gone up 5 times off the back of that news. TGG, similarly, we invested in that company at Skeena. They really rallied. So that's the first time I think we've seen where you make a good discovery and your share price gets an immediate response and an immediate reaction. That's a bit of a change. I think we haven't seen that as much over the last 2 years. So I think investors are keenly watching juniors again, and where there are good results, they're getting set and investing significantly. So I feel like we're on the verge of a breakout. We're on the verge of a change. The other thing, of course, that's happened is we've seen a heck of a lot of M&A going on, and that's freeing up a lot of our existing group of investors in the sector, not the generalists, although guys like Silvercrest, of course, did have some generalists invested in them. That money's now looking for a home. There's less places for it to go in the mid tiers, and people are bigger investors. And I'm very happy to report this. We met with a number of them at the BMO conference in Miami earlier this week, that are looking to redeploy capital into smaller names. So I think we're on the verge of a change. And that will lead into a serious bull market over the next 5 years as the supply-demand fundamentals of the copper market play out. So you've got a neat little window now whereby you can still buy things at bargain basement prices. Vizsla Copper, as an example, if for no other reason to invest, we're so very, very cheap at the moment. All that metal, nearly $100 million of work on those projects being valued by the market in sort of $20-25 million bracket. That will change. I think we'll see, any name in the sector. I sort of joke a little bit, but I think this is right. If you go back to 2004-5, anything you invested in our space, good companies run by good people, went up somewhere between 5 and 10 times over the next 5 or 6 years. We're going to see that again. So the opportunity is huge. I can tell you personally, I've been deploying a heck of a lot of my own capital into the sector, with pleasant returns so far, but I think we're going to see returns that'll rip your face off over the next 5 years. So now's the time to get set, Robert.
Now's the time to get set. So it's interesting because I think Vizsla Copper put in a major washout bottom in January at 5 cents a share. And I wanted to talk to you because of news you put out on January 15th, and also because the VCU chart is now in a bullish trend. And this pullback it's had back to 7.5 cents might actually be a great opportunity. So let's talk about Poplar South, because look, I know you have the Woodjam project, which is absolutely fantastic. It's a great foundation of value for the company. I think the market cap should probably be higher than it is just based solely on that asset. But let's talk about Poplar and Poplar South, because as you mentioned, new discoveries can supercharge the market, get investors excited, and maybe Poplar South, this new target that you've identified with an IP survey, could be that for Vizsla Copper.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to touch on something you mentioned there, that dip we saw in January, I was happy to sort of wade into the market when I was finally free of any inside information I had. And I bought 1 million shares on the market at 5 cents. I might finally have picked the bottom of something. I'm not the greatest investor in the world, but I've been buying the stock on the market, and Eric Sprott and other great investors have told me when you see boards of managements buying their own stock, that's a pretty good indicator of what's going on and a good time to buy. So I waded into the market and bought a bunch of stock, and I continue. I've now put in just under $2 million of my own money into the company, and will continue to buy the stock and invest in placements. So great time to be buying. I think we are at the bottom. Hopefully we're at the bottom. The Poplar Project, you're right. So Woodjam is our flagship. We've got the bulk of our resource base there. There's a high grade component to that. 33 million tons in an open pit environment at about 0.7% copper, which is above the global average mine grade of copper mines around the world, which is about 0.6%. We bought Poplar early last year, on the basis that it was a large resource base that had been drilled out, that's ready for a PEA, ready for studies and permitting. It just doesn't have, the metal price doesn't support that development at the moment, but it's a large resource base that we already have there, with 2 billion pounds of copper and 750,000 ounces of gold in the ground at surface. And we paid $2.7 million in stock, and a few $100,000 in cash for that asset. I just couldn't look at a bargain like that and walk away. That project's had in today's dollars over 50 million spent on it. Has this, so we really just buying bargains and bottom fishing, I suppose. Great suite of assets, but the really intriguing thing is that never had any real exploration outside of the deposit. The deposit was discovered by Utah Copper in the 70s. They haven't done, past explorers haven't been able to fund much work. So there are sort of a few dripping roasts in there, Robert. And when we got out there and back in May last year, we're a little bit astonished with what we saw at this Copper Pond or Poplar South area. Huge area of alteration, outcropping porphyry style rocks, argillic alteration, some phyllic alteration around there, over a big area. And we knew that there was a mag low sitting in the middle of it. So we looked at that in detail. We then completed soil geochemistry over that anomaly, that mag anomaly in that area of alteration. I should also say that we saw some very heavily copper stained malachite and azurite rich rocks in some workings and diggings around that area. So we thought we were onto something pretty interesting. The scale of the alteration was interesting. We completed soil geochem over the top of it and found a very strong copper anomaly at the center of this mag anomaly. I should mention on terms of the mag anomaly, in porphyry environments, you often get magnetite destruction at the center of the porphyry system. And that's how you get these donut ringed mag high anomalies around porphyries that alert you to the fact that there could be one hiding there. And this is the perfect donut shaped anomaly in that sense. We did the soil geochem, strong copper at the center of that anomaly, and moving outside of that, and some moly, and moving outside of that, you get quite strong zinc. So there's classic porphyry style geochemical zonation there. We then completed a series of IP lines over that anomaly and found a very strong chargeability high there. So every single vector you could ever want, geology, mag, IP, and geochem, all say scream drill here. There was a shallow drill hole at the edge of that, of sort of a 60 meter deep hole that didn't clip anything and didn't hit the porphyry system and wasn't at that porphyry center. But this anomaly just screams out drill me. I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that this will be a porphyry system and we'll make a discovery. So there's some geological risk, but I think it's a better than 50-50 chance that there's a very significant porphyry sitting under there. Then it will become a question of tons and grade. But I think we're a good chance. It's the most textbook porphyry target I've ever seen. I've been doing porphyry exploration for 25 years. It's a beauty.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the diagrams in the news release from January 15th, and this is a screamer drill target. I consider myself to be a porphyry guy, although I'm not a geo. I do follow a lot of porphyry explorers and spend a lot of time trying to learn as much as I possibly could about porphyry exploration the last several years. And this is a screamer. I mean, you've got the soils lighting up, you've got the zonation in the soils, you've got the alteration at surface, you've got the magnetics, the chargeability, zonation as well. It's a beauty target. So something I hear you say on a regular basis that I really like is this saying, the size of the prize, the cost of the test, and the chances of a success. So how would you rate this Poplar South target in terms of those three criteria, Craig?
Okay, so size of the prize. Well, we know just up the road, just to the south of us, you've got the Huckleberry Mine, which is a long-term producer. You've got another company's Berg and Burgett, Surge Copper's projects there, proven porphyries. You've got the Poplar Project, which we own, Poplar Deposit we own. So we know it's a porphyry terrain, and those porphyries can have scale and grade. And Huckleberry's been a long-term producer for Imperial Metals and some care and maintenance now. A Huckleberry would be lovely to us. So size of the prize is right. Porphyry systems as well are typically large deposits, so that ticks that box. Cost of the test, very, very cheaply. Very cheap. We paid $2.7 million for the asset and for all this wonderful exploration upside. We can drill year round there. We very good road access, very straightforward. We drove our vehicles onto the outcrop and onto that alteration system. So super straightforward to get a drill rig out there and test the target. We're not going to have to drill too deep because at the Poplar, the wonderful thing is all this alteration, mineralisation outcrop. So we know we're at the right level of the system where we can make a shallow discovery. So it ticks that box in a major way. And then chance of success, never better in the sense that we are in that porphyry terrain. It's got proven metallogeny, proven prospectivity. And then very importantly, the work that the team, led by Steve Blower and Dr. Chris Leslie, have done out there has confirmed that we have those vectors, that we have, strong indications that there's a porphyry lurking there. So it just ticks very bright, big green ticks for each one of those.
Very good. So does Poplar South get drilled this year, Craig?
It does. It does. We'll have to raise some money closer to the time when we drill. Of course, we've got good, strong access to flow through capital here and other capital sources. While I was at BMO, Steve Blower was at the CEM conference in Whistler. Clearly, there's a number of investors that are looking to get set, names like Vizsla Copper. So financing is not an issue. And of course, my team, my partners and I write big checks for these things. So we want to see this get drilled. The other thing, we made a porphyry discovery 2 years ago at Megaton on the Woodjam property. We clipped the edge of a porphyry system. We need to go and find the center of that. So I think we're going to do that this year. This year is a little bit different for us. I think the last 2 years we've spent our time getting our head around the geology, metallogeny of the Woodjam property and the systems that have been discovered there. We've now done that. We can certainly expand the high grade zones that we have there. We had some great results back in September from particularly the Deerhorn area where we 110 meters at 1.3% copper equivalent type numbers. So we know that's there to be followed up and to expand that high grade resource. But this year, given that you've seen the market turn and start to reward discoveries like we saw with AMARC and TDG, we want to focus. We listen to the market, we listen to what people are responding to, and we're explorers ourselves. We love to make discoveries. There's nothing better than making a discovery. So Steve and the team very keen to get in and drill that Megaton target, get in and drill Poplar South. There's a couple of other targets on the Woodjam property, including a big chargeability anomaly called Great Plains to the south on the property there. So we want to follow that up. And then we've got a sort of a wild card entry into our plans this year. We acquired the ground immediately north of Kodiak's gate zone. We've got the ground 5 kilometres to the north, and the structures that host and associated with the gate zone, where they've made what I think is an outstanding discovery, continue on into our ground. And we've got a number of lookalike targets emerging that look very, very similar to Kodiak's gate zone. So I want to get in, or Steve and I want to get in and test that this year as well. So this is a little bit different for us, very much focused on discovery.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love the Vizsla Copper story here because you have all these high torque, drill targets that are just ready to be drilled. I mean, you've done all the preparation work to identify them. I'm sure your geos have a pretty good handle on where exactly they want to place the holes. So the question is always money, Craig. That's a big thing in this industry. It's a big thing in life. How much money do you need to raise in 2025 to do what you plan to do?
Yeah, look, I think we've got a number of property payments coming up late this year. We've got less than $1 million in the bank. For a lot of people that would be concerning, but for me, it's not an issue. We'll raise money in a timely manner. And as I say, we write big checks ourselves. I've put in, $1.5 million of my own capital, a bit more than that now, having bought on market. I'm not worried about that. We'll continue to write big checks. I think if there's one sort of detraction to what we're doing, we've got probably 229 million shares out now. More dilution coming up on a financing. I think we're going to bide our time on this as much as we can, because we've got enough money to get us through the next few months before we decide on the drill program. But we're going to have to raise money certainly to drill. There's no other way to do it. I know people get upset at the dilution that comes with that, but if you want to be involved in discoveries, you've got to finance things and drill holes. The best way to manage it is to continue to support your company and write checks for it. And that's what I continue to do.
Craig Parry, thank you so much for your time.
Robert, really appreciate it, mate. Thank you.
Cheers.